All right. Okay. So, good evening, everyone. Happy New Year. Thanks for joining us on the first session of the year. I'm Shanika, uh, board current chapter president for BDPA. And yeah, we're here to kick off the year. So, just to open up about BDPA for anyone that's joining, for BDPA Atlanta, anyone that's joining for the first time. So, we're a nonprofit organization who our areas of engagement are mostly around exposure. So exposure on, I guess, exposure to technology, professional development, ways to kind of grow in your field. Like BDPA's motto, for those that maybe haven't heard it, so advancing careers from classroom to the boardroom. So focusing on how can we bridge the gap in our community, in areas where there maybe isn't equity as of now. So just some highlights. We have our STEM program that should be starting up pretty soon. So I guess one of the areas that we focus on is our STEM program. So it's K through 12, and we also have areas for college students to get involved. So that should be starting up hopefully in a couple weeks. We have registration in progress now for students that might be interested in the curriculum, but also for volunteers that might be interested in helping us facilitate the curriculum. So I'll drop a link for that in a bit. We are so in addition to the STEM program, we have like our monthly meeting series that we have here, where Matrix for the last couple of years has helped us out graciously for providing content. So thanks again, Matrix and John, for continuing to collaborate with us. And I'll also plug, because I've been seeing it on social media, that conference registration for 2023 is live. So if you are interested in getting more involved with BDPA and or attending the conference that will be in Atlanta again for this year, that is available. I'll grab links for that too. And if there are any questions around any of these, feel free to connect with us on our social media, which I'll drop links to that. So with that, I'll hand it over to John to introduce our guests.
Okay, great. Thanks, Shanika. So excited for this year. We last year, our theme for our monthly meetings, it was mainly about like giving back and trying to partner with Atlanta-based organizations at the time, as we were kind of coming out of and through the pandemic at this time last year. The hiring that was going on was just crazy. The marketplace was just wild. So Shanika and Victor and I just thought about, well, what could we do? What kind of theme could we have? And so we decided to have like a spotlight series throughout the year. So we had a great run through the year with a lot of super companies based in Atlanta that gave great presentations and offered a lot of networking and valuable advice, whether it was upskilling on the technical side or functional side, or just pure networking and explaining their job process and making their positions open and available to our group. So very, very good, great feedback from that. As we came into this year, our thought was, again, the group is about learning, continuous learning, and investing in others. And we thought, what better than leadership to be the theme of the year? So all throughout the year, we've got it charted out. We're probably good all the way in through May at this point, with speakers and topics lined up. So we kind of have our act together this year. It feels pretty good. And none better than my friend Myra, who we worked together a couple of years back at Matrix. Most of you know what Matrix does. We're the 15th largest IT staffing company in the country. We had and still have a professional services group where Myra worked, and she was a delivery leader in that group. And I got to experience Myra's leadership as you know, we assisted customers from end to end projects, and having Myra lead those projects and set the tone and a culture of true empathy with everyone involved, with all the stakeholders, with her internal teammates, you know, on the sales and recruiting side, to the staff that she was leading, to our customers. And you know, there's, and she's going to get into this, so I'm gonna wrap this up in a second, but the effectiveness that I saw with Myra, and how she did things and how she made people feel, it's unforgettable. You forget a lot of things in your life, but you always remember how people make you feel. And so I'll always be grateful for that with Myra, with some of those projects that were difficult ones that she led through, and it was because of her style and how she did things. So I think this is good. This is such an important topic, one that you know, we all should like turn the camera back on ourselves and like look at, like, how are we? Are we empathetic? Are we not? I encourage you to take that quiz if you haven't done it. You know, that give you a good little read there. But anyways, I'm going to let Myra tell you a little bit about her background. It's deep, it's impressive. Love the healthcare technology side of it. It's a passion for me. My oldest daughter just graduated from Georgia Tech, and she's going to be a technical solutions engineer at Epic Software up in Madison, Wisconsin. So near and dear to my heart, good stuff. But Myra, welcome. Thank you for being our lead kickoff meeting for the year. What a great topic. So welcome, Myra.
Thank you so much, JV. That was an amazing introduction, and I'm grateful to have known you over all these years, and to have partnered with you and collaborated with you, and just to call you my friend. So thank you so much for that. Just a quick, I don't want this to be about Myra, and I think I said this earlier, but JV's right, head on healthcare. Healthcare is me. When I was a child, I always wanted to be a nurse. I knew I was going to grow up and become an RN. And I did go to college and got accepted into the RN program, and did a full year of clinicals after my freshman year. And then after that was over, I said, I'm not so sure that nursing is for me. And there are multiple reasons why, but that did not deter me from still having a love for healthcare, the hospital space, the medical world, and science. And so, although I didn't become a registered nurse, I obtained my undergraduate at a small private school in Missouri, which I'm originally from Missouri, the Midwest, Columbia, Missouri. And that business degree led me after college to State Farm Insurance, and which is, I feel, a connection to Victor and to Shanika. And that's where I got my career start. And I would tell you that the leader I had at State Farm Insurance, my VP at that time, and I was a kid actually starting out. And so I was very green. And when I got to State Farm, they made me a manager over a department of 25 people. And half of those people were twice my age. And so, boy, was that a rude awakening. But I tell you, the leader that I had mentored me, showed me what it is to be an empathetic leader, to have compassion for people, to understand where others are in their lives. And she groomed me, and I spent five years at State Farm in two different locations, two different states. And from there, my career left State Farm and still kind of moved over into more of the healthcare area, and began getting into IT, project management. And anyone knows me like JV and Pont. And I love organization. Everything has to be in its rightful place. And so project management has been a career path that is pretty much just who I am. So I've led multiple projects, large scaled projects in the healthcare space mostly, and also in the financial tech world. So I've spent a little bit of time at Fiserv. I spent several years at Equifax, but mostly my career has been in the healthcare IT space. So a lot of years at McKesson, Athena Health, and now I'm at a startup company called Fountain Life, and feel free to go out there and Google Fountain Life. But we are all about predictive medicine, predictive diagnosing and testing early, and detecting illnesses and issues early on in life, so that we're dealing with changing people's lives, increasing their longevity, and keeping them from ever becoming sick. So go out there and check out Fountain Life. It's fountainlife.com. And right now I went in and started the PMO from scratch. I've been there for 2 years, and now I've morphed over into the product management world. And so I'm acting as the senior director of the product management space there. So I live in Metro Atlanta. I have a wonderful husband, 5 grandchildren, and a puppy named Bailey. So that's who I am. And from there, we do have a guest speaker. I've invited Ponce Kenton. I'm going to do an introduction of Ponce as we move forward, because he has a special place in this particular subject matter and topic. So Ponce and I have worked together at McKesson. He's a dear friend. And I'll do some additional introductions of him as we bring him on into that area of the presentation. I want to keep this very informal. I want everybody to be able to come off mute, have conversations, because this is a deep topic, right? It's very important. It's very key. And so I don't want this to be a session where Myra's talking to a PowerPoint presentation, which you'll see on my screen. I'm using this as a way to keep me on track, but I want us to engage in some real conversation as if we're sitting around a coffee table with a cup of tea and a cup of coffee. All right. And feel free to ask questions as we move along. So empathetic leadership and authentic relationships. I don't have to think about this very hard, because that's my personality, is a compassionate, caring, loving type person. Like I want to help everybody, right? It doesn't matter who you are or what's going on. And so, but I also realize that not everyone has those traits and that personality. So this is a great topic to begin the BDPA sessions with. So one of the things that when JV asked me, or John, sorry, I say JV, I call JV John JV. When John asked me to do this, one of the things I thought about was, I think a lot of people confuse empathy and sympathy. And as I started to do some research, I did find in my research that it is, people use it interchangeably, and people really don't understand the difference between the two. So I want to touch a little bit about that, and then we get into what is empathetic leadership. Why is it important? Why is it important for us to have empathy in the workplace as leaders? What does that do for us? What does it do for the company? What does it do for the employees? So what are the outcomes of empathetic leadership? What kind of traits exist? I think a lot of us think that, I care about people and I'm empathetic, but are there particular specific traits that exist in that type of personality? Are there pros and cons of being an empathetic leader? Yes, most definitely. And we'll get into those. How do we measure what level of empathy that we possess? And then we'll just continue to have open dialogue and any Q&A. And of course, I cite at my work. So what is the difference between sympathy and empathy? If you read the slide here, sympathy is a Greek word, meaning together and pathos referring to feelings or emotion. And sympathy is really when a person, you actually share the same feelings as the other person. You actually take on those feelings. So if someone loses someone close to them and that individual is sad, grieving, when you have sympathy, then you're actually grieving with that person. So you're actually experiencing that grief or that loss. And so that's why when, someone transitions or passes away, there are sympathy cards, right? Um, Empathy is really different. It's also coming from the same Greek word, but it differs because it has a greater emotional, an implication of greater emotional distance. So with empathy, the best way to describe it is that if you're feeling something or experiencing something, I can empathize with you because I can understand or imagine how you might feel. You know how we use the term, if I walked in your shoes, or, or if I switch places with you, then I can kind of understand how you might feel. You're not necessarily carrying the weight or carrying those emotions internally to where you're becoming sad or even you're becoming depressed or whatever those emotions are, but you can put yourself in those shoes and understand how that individual is feeling, or imagine what you would do if you were in that person's situation or circumstance. Does that make sense?
It does.
Anybody have any comments or anything that you want to share around sympathy versus empathy? Do you see how we probably interchange the two? Yeah.
Myra, I was about to say it's a seems like a fine line if you're not, really thinking. Well, when you're in the moment, it can be a fine line between sympathy and empathy. But if if I think about interactions I've had, and like you talked about losing someone, and how I felt for that person versus interacting with someone on something, and as we get into this, how to, like you said, look at the world from their perspective without um you know without, for me, kind of going against what I'm trying to achieve, or trying to get across. So it is a fine line.
It is a fine line. It is a fine line. And I think that's why we interchange the two unless we're really focused on it at the moment. So I wanted to bring this up as the first thing that we talked about, so that we could, differentiate between the two as we have our conversations.
Yeah, and I wanted to jump in with you as well, Myra, when I think through the sympathy and empathy. So one of the things, especially as a leader, that I think we sometimes do, which is why we attempt to interchange, because we put up guardrails and we don't want to put ourselves in the shoes of that person that's experiencing a particular thing. So it's a safety mechanism for us to say, you know what, I feel bad for you, but I'm not going to position myself to feel as if I'm in your situation. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes also lessens that ability for us to connect with our people. Right.
Yeah.
Because people know when, hey, you're just feeling bad for me versus you're actually understanding my perspective, you're understanding my vantage point. Not that you have to feel, but you're feeling what I feel. Right. And
Right.
people understand that difference. But I just wanted to jump in and add that.
Yes. Yeah, that's good. That's good right there. Yep, exactly. And when we talk about empathetic leadership, what is that? It's definitely to me, and JV, thank you again for your descriptive of who I am in the workplace, and what I try to do for my colleagues and for the clients. But it is a style of leadership that takes others into consideration, right? I'm for instance, one example I know I work with a lot of international folks, whether it's a client or whether it's a colleague. I'm working right now. I have a team of people in Egypt. I have folks in India. So, and every day I'm working with these colleagues. Well, the thing is that I consider them when just simple time zone, right? Like some of those folks are 9.5 hours ahead of me. Some are 6 hours ahead of me. So when we make meetings internally, I'm the first person to say, hey, it's going to be midnight there. It's going to be 10 o'clock at night. And we need to consider that, right? We need to consider other cultures and what they're experiencing and what they're going through when we're stateside. It's a style of leadership that we do take others people into consideration. One of the things that I also talked about in this is that meeting people where they are. We all sometimes get caught up in, everybody's at the same level that I'm at. Everybody should think the way I think. And that's so far from the truth. So we have to meet people where they are in the moment in their life, because, especially in today's society when we've got so much information being thrown at us, right? We're coming through a 2.5 years, almost 3 of a pandemic. So people are just beginning to kind of unfold out of their shells and coming back together, as Victor described about State Farm coming together and celebrating their 100-year anniversary. Some people are still a little shy, right? So we need to take that in consideration. And again, we need to meet people where they are in their lives, in their current lifespan. We need to understand other points of view, so how, I may think one way, but, JV may think totally different on the same issue. So we need to be cognizant of that. Empathetic leadership also holds a genuine interest in others and how they feel. Sometimes we talk and we talk and we talk and we don't listen. We don't even pause to listen sometimes. And we take interest in others. And then empathy takes it a step further in that it's the ability to take action to help others. So it's one thing to empathize with folks, right? But it's another thing to say, well, how can I really help that person? What does that person really need? How many of us really stop and say, we'll ask people, well, how are you? And most people really don't care how you are, even if you tell them how you are. And so this is, are you willing to really dig in and help someone, right? And give back. So that's, I'm constantly trying to give back and meet people where they are and making sure that I'm doing whatever I can to make them feel better. So I don't know about you all, but that's any thoughts on, taking action or any examples of what you may have done recently to, take someone else's viewpoints into consideration.
Myra, did you see Shanika's comment in the chat?
I haven't looked.
Okay, it's a good.
She said, "I'm sorry, I'm not. I didn't have that up."
No worries. It's she said, I wonder if there's also a fine line in not coming across as condescending or looking down on someone. And I think that was in that, like, Ponce had said that, hey, there's a fine line with sympathy and empathy. And this is a good, like, to me, that's a great question to talk about, and other leaders to learn from other leaders on that, because the last thing we'd want to do is have our teams think we're looking down on them.
Absolutely. Anybody have any other thoughts on that particular comment?
Yeah, something that I'll pose, especially to avoid, sometimes appearing as condescending, is especially in those groups where, you're closely connected and you're engaging almost daily. When you have moments of vulnerability, allow those to show, right? So allow whatever gaps or failures or, like I said, vulnerabilities that you may have to come across for other people to observe. That way you're appearing as a more authentic leader, right? So it's not that people can't touch you. That way, when they're experiencing something and you're showing genuine interest, you're showing genuine empathy, it's not crossing over into that, you gaslight me. You're just trying to blow smoke so I can go away or whatever the case may be. But you're actually showing, this genuine interest. And I think a lot of that comes from the relationship.
Right. I'd like to give an example, and this is a personal example, but it occurred in the workplace with a leader of mine. And in 2014, I lost my son. He was 25 years old, and at the time of his death. And 6 months later, I took a new job, and it was with a startup, right? So it was just crazy busy, and just I was traveling a lot, but I was still very much grieving. And there was a leader, one of our, he was, what was he? I think he was probably the CEO. He was brought in into the company, and he lived in Utah, but he would come back and forth to Atlanta, once every other week or what have you. So he had this nice office, and he came in one day, and I was there, and I don't know how he saw this, but I guess I had a look on my face that day. I must have been looking sad or what have you. And he came to me. He said, "Can I see you in my office, Myra?" And I was like, "Oh my God, he's calling me in his office. What's going on?" So he calls me in his office, and he said, because I wouldn't tell anybody. I never told anyone at the company that I had lost my son 6 months ago, because I didn't want people to feel sorry for me. I didn't want people to look at me and say she can't hold her own because she's grieving. So I didn't tell anybody. And so, but this particular leader called me into his office, and he said, he said, I want to talk to you. He said, I sense that something's off. Like, not that you've done or said anything, but he said, something in your eyes. And so I actually said, well, I told him what had happened. I lost my son. I'm still grieving, but I'm trying to not show that here in the workplace, because I don't want people to feel sorry for me, and I don't want people to say that I can't do my job. That man took me by my hand and said, first of all, get that thought out of your head. And he said, second of all, he said, I am here for you. He said, whatever you need. He said, if you want me to pray with you, I will pray with you. If you need to come into my office, even when I'm here, kick me out, and you need to be in a safe place for however long you need, take my office. When I'm not here, my office is your office. Come, shut the door, do what you need to do, cry, scream, or whatever you need to do. Just know that I am here for you. And he prayed with me that afternoon. Who does that? What leader would actually take someone into the office? First of all, notice that something was wrong. And I didn't think that that I was showing any signs of anything, but he had that level of compassion about himself that he was able to dig deeper and actually look into my eyes, see that something was off, and then generate that conversation with me and let me know that he genuinely cared about me and what I was going through at that time. And never made me feel bad, never made me feel like I shouldn't have shared that with him. And right today, a couple of years ago, actually, he came to me, reached out to me because he had a job opening and wanted to know if I wanted to come work for him. And I referred somebody else to him, and he hired that particular individual. So you just never know. That's what an empathetic person or leader, that's the kind of effect that they can have on a person, right? So that I just wanted to share that. It's pretty personal, but it happened in the workplace, and I had the experience of having a leader that exuded everything that we're talking about here tonight. So I just wanted to share that.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Hey, Jonathan.
I had to go fix some things. It's like, okay, they can't hear me. I wanted to comment back on when you're looking at offshore teammates and really pushing meetings earlier in the day, some of my teammates were, oh, let's do it at 1 o'clock. Hey, remember what time people are online, and even when some of people are up late at night and it's 1 in the morning, they handling a major issue. I'm like, all right, as soon as this is done, go to bed, get offline, so that you have a life too. So I try to make sure I exude those types of feelings with my team and let them know, hey, I care about you, and hopefully they respect that from me.
Oh, I'm sure they do. I'm sure they do. And that reminds me of something along the same lines, Jonathan, that I always tell my teams, I'm not ever going to ask you to do something that I'm not willing to do, right? I used to work for Xerox, and we were on site at Coca-Cola. They were one of our major clients, and I ran the mail operations at Coca-Cola. And so I had a bunch of people, right? Like a lot of them were contractors that, and some were full-time Xerox employees. But, when the holidays came at Christmas time, you could not imagine the amount of mail and packages that came in and out of, Coca-Cola's mail operations center is basically like a post office, huge. And we had international mail that had to go out. So it would get tough, right? Just we'd get backed up. I'd get out there on the floor and start pitching mail, right? Just pitching mail. I'd deliver mail to the floors and push the cart around and all of that. So it's like empathizing with those folks, because we always knew that we'd have that peak volume at the holiday time for a few months in advance and a few months after Christmas. And it's like, you know what, let me get in there and roll my sleeves up. I can pitch mail just like you can. I just don't have to sit in this office here watching you work, right? While I'm doing that, let me get out here and help you. So I'm never going to ask anybody to do something that I'm not willing to do myself. So I think that shows a lot of gratitude, a lot of empathy, and people, your teams appreciate that type of behavior. So I agree with you 100%. Awesome. All right. Why is empathy important in leadership? We talked a little bit about the pandemic, but wow, there's so much mental. People are in such a mental state these days. There's so much going on. We've been through so much. And I think now it's even more important, and all the reading that I did and some of the research that I did online and looking at articles and things, it is becoming more imperative that leaders show empathy, have compassion, because we don't really know what people are going through, right? We don't know. People are coming into work and we don't know what they've experienced and what's going on. And so we have to be very careful that we are really and truly in tune with our colleagues and with our staff, right? You want to build and generate trust, right? I don't know how many of you are in IT. I know, of course, Ponce and Daisy, you, Jonathan, as well. But, if you know anything about Agile and Scrum and what that means, to me, Agile and Scrum, that mentality is really all it is employing empathy in the workspace. It's building up that trust, it's empowering our people, it's giving them the autonomy and the space to do their jobs, right? And to talk and work amongst one another, and to be able to come to you when there are impediments and blockers, and that they can then trust us as leaders to really listen to them, come in, and really help resolve the issues at hand, so that they can become and keep being as productive as they possibly can. So it's a motivator. We talk about servant leadership, and there's a whole nother topic, I think, in itself, because a lot of people say, oh, you see on LinkedIn, I'm a servant leader, servant leadership. It's like, do you really know what that means? Do you really know what that means? And when we are empathetic, when we carry these traits, and when we actually deploy that type of leadership and that type of mentality, that gives us as leaders greater influence, right? If you're in project management, like I've been all these years, most of the time I'm in a matrix environment where those individuals that are on my project team don't work for me. I don't sign their checks. I don't do their performance reviews. So in all honesty, they really don't have to do anything that I ask them to do. I mean, you know what I'm saying? And so I have to be able to have that level of influence and motivate them to want to work, to want to deliver on time, to go above and beyond the call of duty when it's needed. So it's all about how you treat other people, right? My parents always told me, treat people the way you want to be treated. And that is empathy, again, in a nutshell, coupled with compassion, because you can't be an empathetic leader if you don't have compassion. So that's my take on that. Any other conversation around this?
So Myra, I hope I don't butcher your name. Akila posted a.
Thank you for helping.
And I agree with it, right? It says, I recently learned in HR class being an empathetic leader raises employee engagement. And I'll give a quick example. So 3 months ago, I'm in a new role. And obviously we're a completely remote team. So I haven't physically met people, but we get on teams and everything. There's a gentleman in my organization, it's a manager, and I guess, I don't know, I'm not really understood the history, but he was kind of flagged as someone that is probably doesn't have the chops to kind of rise to the next level. And he sort of has said this to me. And I saw something in this guy. And so I just started talking to him. What's the story? He gave me the history of the company and everything. And I started casting my vision. Here's where I'm going. Here's what I'd like to do. And I asked him, I said, hey, you have, mentioned you have some interest in this. Can you, take a look and go and research this and let me know your thoughts? Well, he went away, came back with a plan. I said, dude, that's spot on. I want you to run with that. Let's go hire your people. Tell me what you need. So we put together this plan, presented it to the CEO, and it's really a cost-saving strategy, right? And my CEO was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So this was in December. It was right before everybody went out for Christmas break. I didn't really think anything about it. I saw a guy with potential, and this is speaking to the employee engagement. I'm gonna get there in a minute. And I figured he had been tagged as like a poor performer. Maybe it's the case, but I haven't seen it, right? Because I would tell him, I said, Thomas, when I tell you when I give you, something and I ask you to look at, you kill it. I mean, you get it done, So I said, I want to maybe move you into this part of, in this bigger role. And he just ate it up. So over the holidays, I got an email from him, and it was like, he said, Ponce, he said, and so I'm in a company that has got a lot of dysfunction. Okay. So they brought me in as a leader with experience to kind of help them scale. So there's, some of this is just a lot of cultural things. So he sent me this email and said something to the effect, I told Myra I would find it. It said something about a leader is someone that casts a good vision and people believe in it. And he said, I want to thank you because you make me excited again to be at this company. He said, I appreciate everything you're doing, and I'm behind you 100%. Fast forward, he's still doing a great job. And I really didn't think anything about the email until Myra called me. And I was like, I guess it didn't resonate with me. And when I tell my story, this is the part that I have to work on when Myra lets me tell my story. But that engagement, that employee engagement has led to other things that I think he's now shared kind of this opportunity with others that are getting to know me. And I'm starting to sense a people leaning in and feeling like, things are going to get better, and, the attitude. So, when she sent this, now we're doing this whole thing about employee engagement, right? A whole kind of company-wide program. And I just wanted to share that as I saw her chat come across, because it just, when I didn't really think about it until Myra started talking to me, and I thought this was the perfect time to just bring that up.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that is true. And you never know how you're going to enrich someone, right? So you just enriched that gentleman's, his probably, you boosted his confidence, right? You gave him something to really go after, and it made him feel great, I'm sure, to deliver. And now he's spreading the word, right? So so he's out there spreading the word. So now you'll have more influence on additional staff members. And God only knows where that's going to take the company, right? How it's going to, again, help increase productivity and, increase in client engagement and those types of things. So you've just done something, just that one seed, you planted that one seed and then trusted that person. So you encouraged, you gave the trust, you motivated, and then look at what happened. There you go. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah.
That's a really hard thing to do, like what Ponce did. Like that is when you're trying to, like, upper level leadership people trying to set a vision or create a new vision. So often what you see, and we've probably all experienced this, it's someone that is up on a, oftentimes, like, everyone sees them up on a pedestal, right? They're the one creating the vision. So they are like, the person in the organization. And very often they're not asking for feedback. They've created the vision, and, darn it, we're going this way, and this is the vision, period. So the fact that you developed and created the vision, but then you had the ability to, like, ask for some input and ask for some feedback, like you just solidified it that much more. So what a great lesson, as we do these things, in our jobs. I mean, to ask for the feedback and not be afraid. Hey, it may your vision might have to change a little bit, but maybe that's the best thing, right?
Yeah, and if you take it a step further, even, right? So we've all been in those conversations, and I think this is where empathy as a leader across a spectrum is definitely important, because what Ponce did was reach out to an individual that has been tagged as having potential performance issues. Now, typically that wouldn't happen either. So as you're presenting a vision to give someone an opportunity to climb from under whatever rock someone is placed on top of them, I think that's an important thing, because now not only does that build trust between Ponce and that individual, but you can guarantee that young man is going to talk. Right. And it builds the brand across the organization that this is someone that you can trust. This is someone you can lean on. This is someone I would run through walls for. Right. And I think as a leader, those are all important attributes, because we're not seeking it. Right. The reason sometimes in you showing empathy and having to dig deep to get examples is because we're not cataloging it. It's just a part of our foundational principle. But those that we're impacting, they're definitely going out and evangelizing on our behalf. So that, to me, that's why it's extremely important to ensure that you're approaching every situation, in the way that you did, Ponce, which I think is beautiful. Not only did you become vulnerable to ask for feedback, but you also put yourself out there by getting it from someone that others were potentially kind of pushing aside.
Yeah, and you hit on some things, and John too, because of where I'm at in the org, right? It is, I invest in the time to kind of skip level down and talk to people. And I bring the problem and say, here's where I'm trying to go. Here's what's in my head. what are your thoughts? Or, you know, do you have better ways to do it? And that's how this thing kind of opened up with Thomas. And, you know, like John said, I guess I didn't think about it that way, but, you know, I'm making that concentrated effort to do this because I feel like there's talent. And, you know, every time I walk into a new org and, you know, people tell me, well, this guy's a high performer, this guy's not. And I always say, I hear you, but I'm gonna do my own homework, right? Because I need to, the way I operate with people, I need to know about them. I need to, like you say, be vulnerable with them. You know, hey, you know, I had some bad runs. I've had some good runs, and I'm honest about it. And that does create, you know, I guess as I've been sitting here thinking about my slides, it does create that empathy, you know, and you'll see why I probably am a little more intentional about it whenever, you know, I get when, you know, I was talking to Myron, I tell the story, but I do it now because it's something that I know is valuable for me as a leader. And it's when I see the people that like Thomas, the guy is like, I'm now telling him, I said, dude, when I team you about something, you don't have to stop what you're doing now. I said, you're killing it, you know? And I said, you know, you push back on me now. Tell me I'm busy. And he's starting to do that. And I'm like, very good. Because he, like you said, I feel like he'd go through a wall for me. That's right. That's where he's at. And so I'm trying to make sure I balance that out, right? And so it's probably the other side of empathy, which is not taking advantage of them, right? So that's, you know, I'm learning that, and as I'm, you know, navigating through my new org.
Yeah, and you just said something, you know, powerful too, Ponce, in the fact that, you know, just, you know, getting that person to, you know, like you said, you know, he'll go through a wall for you, and you were intentional about what you did, right? And how you managed that and how you handled that and how you presented what you presented to him. And for me, and people will appreciate this as in the next couple of slides when I do your formal, here's Ponce. And this, so, but in the fact that for me, it's just innate, right? It's just, you know, right. I go back to our McKesson days together and how I had a colleague, for example, so I'm a senior project manager, right? And I had another colleague, you know, senior project manager, and she's she's awesome, she's great, blah, blah, but she's the kind that will just take somebody and choke them out to get something done, right? She'll just leave them lying dead on the side of the road. And I, with my personality and how I approach things, and totally opposite of that, right? Everybody on the team, and these folks worked for Ponce. I'm in the PMO, and Ponce was the director of engineering. And so these guys, these engineers actually worked for Ponce. So the teams that I had and the projects that we managed, those guys would do anything I asked them to do. Mm-hmm. I didn't even have to ask them, right, Ponce? They would just whatever. Yep. They like whatever I want. Yep, yep. We got, you know, this has to be delivered by what date? Oh, well, that's almost virtually impossible, but they made it happen. So mm-hmm. Our projects got done on time or before time with little defects and so on and so forth. This other person and her teams, those guys were just bulking against her because she was just, I'm telling you, she was just choking them out. And it got to the point where our VP would call me in the office and say, hey, I hate to do this to you again, Myra, but she's leaving carcasses along the way. Can you please take this project over, take this team over, and can you please turn this around so that we can get out? Because they won't do anything for her. And I was like, okay, yeah, sure. And so and that's a detriment now. We'll talk a little bit more about that, because everybody comes to poor little Myra to turn their stuff around after everybody else has beat everybody else up and can't get anything done or out the door. I get tagged to go turn it around because folks don't mind doing whatever I ask them to do or whatever needs to be done. They, like you said, Ponce, they would go through a wall for me. Mm-hmm. And that's rare. And that particular leader, our leader at the time, that, you know, that VP actually told me one day, he said, what you have, Myra, we cannot buy. I can't pay for it. I can't buy it. It's a gift. And that is true. I think people that have that kind of innate, where you don't really think about it. It's just who you are. It is a gift. And so, but it's not to say that you can't be intentional about it. You can't recognize that you do need to have more of those traits that you need to deploy, and not be and not and then not be able to do that, right? So it's something that can be that you can deploy and you can have and get great success. It doesn't always have to be innate. So anyway,
hey Mara, can you hear
go
me?
ahead.
Hey guys,
Hey.
I got a quick question. I'm not quiet. I just was having some computer problems there. So I put my headset on. So Myra touched on it. I'm Daisy. I'm glad to be here, guys. But she touched on this because I had a VP to tell me that, Daisy, you are too empathetic and passionate about your team. And I said, well, is that a bad thing? So guys, is being too empathetic, is that a bad thing? And I said, no, it's not a bad thing, because like Myra said, my team in India, and we talked about it, there's some engineers in my company that kind of jokes because of how the offshore guys speak. And I said, guys, you can't do that. You have to show empathy and be compassionate to those guys, right? But and so I've been used, I don't even know if that's the term, but they know that they can come to me, we can get the work done, right? Because I can work with any people, anytime, anywhere, in any place. And so that could be a bad thing, or it could be a gift, but I would see it as a gift. So I'll leave it like that. Hey, thank you.
No, you're welcome, Daisy. No, thank you for commenting. And I also want to add I was going to bring this whole, detriment thing up as well a little bit in a few seconds. But that same VP that would call me in to say, can you please go in and clean up the carcass and turn this around? When I first went to the group, and Ponce can attest to this, that VP went to my director and said, I don't know if she's really gonna work out. I had transferred into that division. She said, look, I'm not so sure if Myra's gonna be the best person for this role, because I don't see her as that, that driver that I can hit them in the head and get them. And my boss, who knew me pretty well, really well, said, she said, first of all, she said, what you're saying is not true. She said, Myra has a whole other side to her that I pray you never ever have to see. She said, so don't think that just because she's this nice, empathetic, caring, compassionate person, and how she goes about interacting with her team, it seems too nicey nice for you. She said she has a whole other side. Trust me, when something needs to be done, it will get done. And she can make sure that it happens. And so it took about 6 months or so, maybe almost a year. And he started, he's began to see that the way, like you said, Daisy, the way I was managing and leading, it worked, right? It was working, and it wasn't a detriment really. But when depending on the environment and the culture that you're in, the type of leadership that's at the very top, if you're working for those folks that have that, I'm gonna, we gotta be hard knocks, and we gotta choke people out and do all these things, and you gotta be tough, and you can't show any empathy. If that's the culture and the nature in your organization, it's tough for people like myself and Daisy to exist, right? We gotta kind of fight our way through, and we have to show that our style does work. Right. And you get more from that than you do the other way around. So anyway, so this kind of talks about the next slide is outcomes of empathetic leadership. It allows us, I think, to make better business decisions. We get better outcomes, greater productivity. The morale increases. I see that, I think it's Akila that you talked about. I recently learned in my HR class, being empathetic leader raises the employee engagement. Going back to that, it really does. It, to me, it just gives people a desire to want to be there, right? Beyond just getting a paycheck, honestly. So I'm going to pause for a second, because I do have this wonderful bio. Ponce has been so engaging. And don't think this was all by design, the way I've kind of waited to formally introduce him. And there's a running joke between myself, him, and Daisy in that the way I wanted to approach this session, secretly, I want to be a Sherry Shepherd, a Robin Roberts, and a Whoopi Goldberg, and a Barbara Walters all rolled into one. So I asked Ponce to come in and be my guest. So he was going to get introduced at a certain time. So think about a Sherry Shepherd and Robin Roberts when they bring on their guests. So now I'm bringing on Ponce Kenton, and he shared his bio with me. But as you can tell, he and I have a great friendship, working relationship. We've worked together before, we've been colleagues, and he's like my brother. He's an amazing person, lots of fun. He takes care of my husbands and I, one and only Bailey. But on the business side of things, he's a results-focused technology product leader. He's got over 25 plus years of excellence in driving digital and cloud transformation by executing data-driven business strategy, streamlining technology infrastructure, and fostering solutions innovation and building continuous improvement cultures. And you can see by some of the things that he's already shared that everything that's in his bio is spot on. So I want to formally introduce Ponce Kenton, my brother. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to move over to this next slide because this is where we were really going to hone in on the empathy traits. And this is where Ponce gets the opportunity to tell his story. And then you'll actually see and draw the lines as to the information he just shared, why it's so key and important. So when I did research, I found that the top 4 empathy traits, empathy means individuals that possess deep understanding, listens intently, you process other people's feelings, but you're also prompted to take action, and you have the ability to adapt to different cultures and thought processes and points of views, much like Jonathan said about, his teams that are out of the country, Daisy, yours as well, being able to adapt to that and take those folks' feelings and cultures into consideration. And this second thing, which I think is really, it's really key, and I've said it, you've heard me say compassion. It is vital that you can't be an empathetic person if you don't have compassion. And compassion is basically just caring for others. And to me, that's really key. Emotional intelligence. So we have to, what that means is controlling your own emotions. Like, we've got to get to a state where we're able to control our emotions, because again, you don't want to go back to that sympathy piece, right? That's not what you're trying to invoke. And much like I think it was Shanika who talked about, downplaying others or degrading others in the way you treat and talk to them. So understanding your own emotional intelligence, having that sense of maturity and that sense of wisdom will help you with that. And then number 4, flexibility. And again, it's just adapting to varying behaviors, just adjusting overall. You got to be flexible. So with that, I want to bring Ponce back in. Yay, Ponce. And I want Ponce to share a little more deeper about why he is so intentional on what he's doing with his staff and his folks at the company. Ponce.
All right, thanks, Myra. So she mentioned a key word, and I'll tell you why that's important to me. I've been in the industry a long time and started my career in technology as a developer. And someone, I guess, saw leadership capabilities in me, and I found that I loved it. And part of being, having that love was how do I get better so that when that opportunity comes along, they can't scratch that off that I don't have the soft skills, or I don't have the emotional intelligence, et cetera, et cetera. And so I'm a continuous learner, but past couple of I guess progressions in my career, I've had to take various personality tests. Myers-Briggs, DISC. DISC is something you kind of use in a company to kind of communicate with people. There was one I just recently took, which I'll bring it home in a minute. So the one before the test I took at the job I'm at now, I'm at a company called Reg Ed. It's a governance, risk, and compliance software company in the financial services space, and I run all their technology, a CTO for them. And so the job before this one, I've been in this one 90 days now. I had to take a personality test, and I ended up getting a job, right? And somewhere along the way, I forgot, it was somebody in HR or whoever, kind of went over my personality profile with me. And before I go any further, I've always felt like, I'm a good listener. I ask questions. I try to lead with questions. So you heard me talk about the example with Thomas. So, and that I noticed that empowers people, and it's not like I got to try it. I'm just inquisitive that way. And I thought I had a pretty good empathetic game, right? So, I did this personality profile, and I don't know where along the way after I took this job, they went over it with me, and the things that I knew that I would do well, I knew I would score well on, right? And it got to the part about the empathy, and he said, you really don't score as high on empathy as you do the others. And I was like, no, that test is not right. I'm engaging. I'm all about people and all this. So no, it's not right. So I kind of chalked it up, right? And it didn't, I was already in the role and, was there for 5 years. Matter of fact, that I left that role to come to this role. Well, when in the recruiting process for this role, which was like 20 something interviews, I'm flying out to the West Coast, meeting with the boards and all that stuff. One of the last things, they have you, when they know you're going to progress pretty far, it's some kind of psychology test. And I think the name begins with a K or H, I can't remember. And if you get to that point, then you meet with their human capital person to go over your assessment, because what they were trying to do was make sure that I would fit with the leadership team. So we're going over my assessment, and this is the private equity's human capital person. And she, execution, focus, results, all that scored high. And she said, on the empathy side, I can see you don't really score as high. And I was like, that came up before in a personality profile. And it was, I'll be honest, it was deflating to me, because I was like, I've gone through 20 some interviews, and you're telling me I'm not empathetic. I got people that will say they'll come work for me again. So I was kind of, feeling myself a little bit. I was kind of proud of, my track record. And she said, she said, first of all, you're probably going to get this role. She said, it's not a negative on you, but I just wanted you to know about it, because as you're working with the leadership team, you may have to really lean into that. And and I'll tell you why it's clear as day right now. You may have to really pay attention to that to be successful. So, I got the role, and I just, after hearing this the second time, I said, I've got to be intentional about this, right? I've kind of, felt like, I listen to people, I'm vulnerable. I definitely am vulnerable, and I, felt like I care for people. I do want, my one-on-ones, I'm like, hey, turn on your camera, let's talk and all that. But it made me realize that what I'm thinking is good empathy is not the way others may see it. So it was an aha moment for me. And I didn't really, when Myra was interviewing me for this, it was supposed to be, I was just going to interview and just give her my story. And she asked me to come on because of, kind of how I stumbled on telling her this, because I was not proud of it. I don't know why, but I was like, I know I do a good job, but I realized after hearing it the second time and kind of reflecting back, I never really had anybody in my org that, so I'm not, my personality style is not I'm very collaborative. So, that's, when I say this, I've never had anybody where like, I've had to like, I don't know, be that hard boss with. That's just not the way I am. That's the reason why this empathy thing just blew me away, because that's not my style. Myron and Daisy both talked about their style. They may not fit in certain companies because of their style. And my style is like that. But as a leader, it was really eye-opening to me that what this piece may be the one piece that may help me get more engagement out of people, may help me get more people showing up, that it may help me help someone, even if it's in a role outside of this org. So I have been really intentional about it because it's my weak spot. It's my blind spot. That's what I call it, my blind spot. And I'm very intentional about when I do my, when I talk to, as a matter of fact, I'm doing skip levels now, and people, so here's what I had to do, because, when you tell people you're doing skip levels, like, oh Lord, is somebody getting fired? And I was like, look, I just want to learn about the people 1 and 2 layers down, hear from them, just like how I did with Thomas. I want to hear if they have ideas about how to make us better. And I've started doing these. And again, the intentionality of it, some of the people are saying, man, I really appreciate you asking me these questions, right? I really appreciate you taking the time to listen. And I've been transparent. I'm like, I want to be a better leader. And I believe that a leader can go only so as far as his people will take him. And it's really about, we are all of us going along for the journey. And I'm just really kind of out in front and say, this is the direction we're going, right? And so to get that feedback from him, was important for me, because he's 2 layers down. And I told him, I'm not here to see if anybody's a good manager or not, even though I call it a skip level. I have to do part of it as a skip level for the manager for performance reviews. But the other part, I want to know about you, and I block out an hour, right? It's not like a 30-minute thing for me. And, I like I said, I've gotten the feedback that it's been appreciative, and I talk about my vision and, take some of their input. And I said, well, I don't know if we can do that right now, but if we get to that point, I'd like to maybe have you be the champion for that. I'd like to, take you on that ride and support you and see if this is something we can do. So I'm hoping, and I feel like it's going to build those tides that I need to rise the ships, right, and move everybody forward. But I guess to bring it back home, this second profile, and I told when Myra called me, I said, I was a little, my feelings were hurt when I was told my empathy wasn't that strong. But I said, it's been a wake-up call for me, because I'm a big reader, and there's a book that it's by Marshall Goldsmith. It said, what got you here won't get you there, right? So if you think about that, what has got me to this point I may need to add something extra to it to get me the next level. And I'm not trying to go CEO or whatever, but I'm coming into this role like this empathy thing. I've got to be intentional, and and it just can't be checking the box. I've got to be sincere. I got to commit the time to it. And when I listen to people, I gotta, at some point I gotta show that I'm listening by the Thomas example is a good one, giving him the opportunity to kind of stretch his wings. So I can tell you, I feel like it's working, and it is because I'm very intentional. I mean, I have a weekly Sunday afternoons. I do like my weekly look at my week, and in my OneNotes, I have notes in there, be intentional about the empathy, right? So for me, it's a muscle that I have to start working more, because in this organization, it's got a lot of people have been here 20-something years, and the culture is reflective of it, right? And the way I want to go, where, like Myra talked about with Agile, empowering teams, giving them accountability, giving them autonomy, giving them the recognition, I haven't really seen that in this culture. And for me to be intentional about what I'm trying to do in casting the vision, it's got to be more than listening, right? So, and that's the reason I remind myself. Another thing that I went back to doing, and I used to read this book about every year and a half. It's called Crucial Conversations. And it's a good book about, and there's a partner talks about the shared pool of meaning, which is, and it does talk about empathy in there. I was trying to find the exact chapter on it. So I've gone back to where I'm reading it again, because it's that memory muscle that I want to make sure I'm intentional about improving in this new role I'm at. So that's Myra. I don't know if I skipped anything, but that's kind of me and the journey I'm on right now.
No, that's good stuff, and and that just leads us to sometimes the way we see ourselves is not how we're perceived by others, and so and awareness is key. So we have to be aware of that, and you're not aware of that unless you're asking the right questions, getting feedback, or coupled with like these personality psychology tests for those of us that have access to those, to be able to see your answers and how they reflect what level you're at, so that you can improve and you can do better. And I have to say that although I have that personality and all of these traits, there's always room for improvement. There's always room for me to stop and making sure that I'm truly listening and and not getting off track, because sometimes you can get off track. And so Ponce, thank you very much for sharing your story and your experience, because I think it probably resonates with others. So Shanika, can we now kind of shift towards, since we're talking about the personality test and all of that and perceiving how we're perceived, we'd like to see what those results were, and people can come off mute. I want to hear from other people. Come off mute and let's talk about if you took the quiz, did you, when you take this quiz, you're putting out the poll out there now, we want to know, after your results come in to you, did you score or does it reflect how you perceive yourself? Do you think others perceive you differently? And then will you make any changes? Like Ponce has had to become more intentional and make some changes. So Shanika just put the poll out there. So if you took the quiz when you first came on, let's see what we come up with.
If I didn't take it when I saw the email the first time, yeah.
Yes, Jonathan.
I took it. I was like, oh, there's some work in this meeting invite.
I have some. There you go. See, when you come to a session Myra has, you got to do some work. And while you guys are doing that, I think I can just, we're at 7:54, so we still got good time. And I think we've already covered this slide, like the pros and cons. My whole thing is, people view me as sometimes as too compassionate, too nice, and which leads to she's not able to make tough decisions. I'm not able to give constructive criticism and feedback, and depending on the type of culture that your environment that you're in, you can be considered as weak or incapable of assertion. And I will have to say, and as an African-American female in corporate America all my life, we have to be careful. We have to be careful about, because I've been told throughout my, periodically that I'm too assertive. Again, it all depends on the environment and the workplace that you're in and the leaders and who you're dealing with. But as a Black woman in corporate America, we can get labeled as we're aggressive, we've got attitude, all those things. That's a whole nother subject that we could have another session on. But as African American female, we have to teeter this line. So, you know, I can't be considered too nice. I can't be considered too. So I always say this, we need to get paid a little even extra. So, because we got too many things that we have to try to balance in the workplace. And so they did give us a stipend or something for having to, you know, hold our faces and hold our emotions and, you know, and all of that. So that's a whole nother topic, but it does go along with, I think, a very much a con when we talk about empathy. And the weekend, anybody has anything to share, I definitely would love to hear that. And then we've talked about the pros already, so I don't think we need to walk through those again. Anybody have any, come off mute, anybody have any conversations around, let's see, Daisy, who can see?
I just put my score in Myra.
Oh, you did? Yeah, I knew yours was 101 out of 100. So we know, I know you fall right there. A lot of compassion, a lot of energy. Daisy cares about people, just anything that she can do to help in any way, she's always there. So I don't think anyone perceives her any different than how she would have scored on this quiz. What else we got?
Being in this job for 40 years takes a lot of empathy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
a lot. Jonathan, have you got any results yet?
Oh yes, 85 out of 110. So
85.
You know,
okay.
Sometimes I had to think, you know, like, do I really think about people all the time? And then sometimes I was a little neutral. It's like, yeah, maybe I don't do good a job. I was thinking more at home. Do I show more empathy at home as well when I was going through those questions?
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Jonathan, that's a good comment, because my millennial told me one day, she said, "Mom, you don't hear me." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "You don't hear me." So if your millennials tell you that, that means, okay, you need to shut up and just maybe put your big listening ears on and just listen and don't comment. So,
I'm going to put myself out there. Interesting. My daughter just recently asked me, "Hey, Dad, can you write me a letter just talking about what's going on and saying good things, or just saying things about bad or things I care about her or have issues with?" And I'm like, interesting. I thought I was empathetic with my daughter, but I guess I never say those words to her, and she just wanted me to write them down so she could hear them.
That's interesting. That she wanted you to write them down. I like that.
Yes.
All right. So we've got some others. See, Victor, 91 out of 110. All right. So talk to me, Victor.
Yeah, I mean, so my life is about empathy in my approach, but then it's also about a spectrum of things, right? So understanding that every individual requires unique engagement, and so some people just require me to, approach them a bit differently. And even as I looked at the cons and pros that you have on the screen, I think one of the pieces that consistently get added to the folks that are either seen as empathetic or nice or approachable at work is that with that second bullet point, inability to give constructive criticism or feedback is also the ability to hold people accountable and fire them, right? So some people see, especially from a leadership lens, your ability to release someone as the North Star, the golden standard. But what I would like to see is that transform into the North Star being your ability to have empathetic leadership. But for me, I love empathy in the workplace. I think there should be more leaders that display a certain degree of empathy, but of course, there's always a balance.
Yes. And I think that's key. I think that's the key word is balance. There has to be a balance. Too much of anything, one thing is not always, it's not good. So it has to be a balance. Let's see, George, you scored 104 out of 110. I think you've got the highest score out of everybody thus far, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you-
You also look at being the person that I am in HR and looking at these tests and taking my Myers-Briggs disc and predictive index. I'm not going to say that I didn't read the questions and be like, okay, you got to answer this way in order to score high. So there is that point. But however, there are different things that shape you as you grow throughout your career and your life. Me being the person who is 56 years old and whose parents have died and everyone in that generation has passed, and also taking care of them and a couple of them in their later years, it does make you more empathetic and sympathetic for different people's situations. And as a leader.
For sure, for sure. And George, what you're in HR? What do you? Can you share what company are you with?
Charles Schwab.
Okay, awesome.
I've actually worked in several different banks, so they call me the banker in the family.
Well, it's nice to meet you.
Sure.
All right. See, Malika and Dwayne, either of you, were you able to take the quiz?
I did take it. I got a 97
Awesome.
out of the 110. Definitely agree with that. I think one thing that is, I think overall interesting that I was thinking about as far as my role, I am a tech lead or a senior developer. And so I do sometimes appreciate that I'm empathetic, and I think that it helps teams to run well. But I also find that when you're leading teams, people understand that about you, and they also can use it as a con. So I think that just kind of seeing it both ways, kind of how you guys have laid it out with pros and cons, not really being seen as weak. I don't think that I've gotten that feedback, but definitely I find myself sometimes, because I'm so empathetic, that teams can take advantage of that. So
and that's why you got to have that other side of you.
Yes.
You got to have that other side. Like, they got to understand. They got to know that no, Malika, she's empathetic and she's. But don't be fooled by that. There is another side.
Right.
Awesome.
And hello, this is Dwayne.
Hey, Dwayne.
I only scored a 79, which is actually excellent for me because I took this test about 3 months ago and I was in my 50s. So I'm growing.
Awesome.
I just finished reading Critical Conversations as well. And I would normally work in the silo scenarios with also developers. I'm a senior IT manager, and I'm trying to get out of that space to be more management and more empathetic towards my staff. So what you're stating tonight in this meeting is very good for me because I'm learning a little bit more as we go.
Wonderful. Glad to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining us too. All right, let's see. We're kind of at almost basically at the end. The quiz that you took was the Greater Good Berkeley Education. So then in the presentation, there are a couple others that are out here. The Myers-Briggs, that's the one that most of the corporations will issue out when you have to do those, when you're in those leadership roles. Ponce mentioned that one. I've taken that one on many occasions. And then there's this other one here. I wasn't as familiar with it. I didn't take it. I think Shanika, didn't you? I think you took. Did you try this one?
Yeah. So yeah, the personality lab one. I took that one as well. I thought it was interesting. The only unfortunate piece is that when you do get your results, it's kind of high level. Like, they don't dive too much into, like, I guess, like the results, so you would have to, pay a fee for it. But if you're interested in paying the fee, you might be able to dive into a bit more.
Yeah. And as I almost basically come to a close, and we have a little bit more time for more conversation, wanted to just kind of sum it up here. Empathy is key, definitely in leadership, and I think in our everyday lives, right? I think, just hearing George talk about his, situation with taking care of parents that are now gone, and those types of things lead us in our lives, personal lives, to have more empathy. It is a driver. To me, it fosters effective communication because it does force us to do active listening. And I think we all have touched upon that in some form or fashion. Daisy, Victor, myself, all of us. Are we truly listening, and how much are we listening? Are we truly hearing the people that we're engaging in conversations with? And I think compassion is, almost at the very, very top. But if we have those types of traits, or even if we are intentional about it, then it will, to me, invoke genuine and caring relationships and long-lasting relationships. And then in the corporate environment definitely leads to better outcomes. So we want to, at the end of the day in corporate America, it's all about the bottom line. I don't care what anybody says. That's what it ends up being about. And also, if we're going to help them get to that bottom line, we must. It's imperative that we lead in a way that we would want to be treated, and we would want to be led. So I think that just is important. And I don't think you have to be a psychologist or a mental health provider to deploy empathy. I think we've all can attest to that. And my final quote is, we just need to care as much about others as we do ourselves, creating authentic relationships and a desire to take action. So with that, I'm actually at a close. We do have some extra time left. If we want to continue more conversations, or if anyone has additional questions, please feel free. So the floor is open. I want to say a sincere thank you to Shanika, Victor, and my dear friend, John, for giving me this opportunity. It's always a pleasure to be able to come and fellowship with others, to learn, to engage, and just generate this type of conversation. I think it's very much needed. And I'm so impressed with BDPA, and thank you for always allowing me to come and participate and join. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Myra. Thank you, Ponce. And again, thanks, John. I do see George has their hand raised. Any comments, George? Questions?
Yes, I did want to speak on another thing, is that throughout my life, one thing that I've always done, it seems like instilled in me by my mother, was to volunteer. I will say, when it comes to volunteering, and especially if you're in a leadership position, try to lead a team of people who are not getting compensated. You will learn so much about how to motivate people so that when you get into a position of leadership and you're paying people, it's much easier. I will definitely say that. And then also, for those of you who don't have children, or if you do have children, because you handle your children different than you do other people's children, but work with children. Oh, I tell y'all. Because the one thing about it is you got to curtail your mouth, of course, because there's certain things you can't say. And of course, they're other people's children. So there's certain things you can't do, but also to motivate them to get to go the direction that you want to. You learn a lot about empathy and sympathy in those two situations when it comes to volunteering and motivating people.
I agree.
Oh, and by the way, I do have a shameless plug when it comes to volunteering. There are those of us, such as myself and Victor and a couple of other people on this call, who are seeking volunteers for the BDPA conference that will be held here in the Atlanta area. So please don't hesitate to contact us. And for those of you who are getting this on a recorded, we will take you also.
Awesome. Thank you, George.
Myra and Ponce, thank you so much for being with us tonight and just sharing your insights. You both were inspiring. You both were vulnerable. it takes courage and strength to do those things. Very, very much appreciated. I tell you what did upset me at one point tonight was I looked down as I'm experiencing this conversation. What a great conversation, discussion, learning opportunity. And I looked down, there's only 11 people, 12 people on the call. I'm like, goodness gracious, how do you people, you don't know what you're missing out. We should have had 112 people on this call, for the content that was there. It was so good. So my shameless plug, thank you, George, for leading the path here, would be to ask for help from you guys as you see us, as you see Shanika, Victor, myself, BDPA, as we post things out for future topics, because they're all good, maybe not as good as tonight, but they're all really good. To just, like it, comment, repost, share a little love on it, just to, we should have a bigger group of people in this, don't you think?
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, John. And again, it's one of those instances where, especially in our community, when we're trying to impact our people in the workforce, how important it is to have leaders that can position themselves to be mentally in the situation of their employees, and to not have leaders on the call to hear, as well as employees to embrace, like, what does that look like? It's challenging because we understand, if I just looked at it from a retention perspective, right? If I have empathetic leaders, that's different from what we've pushed in the past with the hard-nosed, run you over with 10 buses leader. Like, an empathetic leader is going to cause those employees to stay. So many times we see the memes out there about a good leader versus a boss, and all of those examples. Well, it starts here with empathy. So definitely we'll be pushing this content via our social sites. We have it recorded. So we'll have it available to you. And to George's point, it was awesome. We have so many unique things that we're going to try to include in this year's conference. It would be awesome if we could have, all of our friends here to not only potentially volunteer, but if you can't volunteer, just participate in any form or fashion. That would be great, because content like this in our communities, I know Myra mentioned, how challenging it is sometimes for women, and African-American women especially, to just be their authentic selves within the workplace. Well, we need forums where we could talk about that.
Yes.
And if we create it, it's not going to happen. And then unless allies can step into spaces where those women exist to help support, foundationally who they are, it's not going to get better. So in order to see effective change, we have to be present, and a part of being present is joining sessions like this, where you're getting the content to help equip you and tool you to go into those rooms and have those impactful conversations.
I'm so glad you said that, Victor, because in our prep sessions, Myra and I, we talked about that, and that it's a tough conversation, but it's one that has to happen, and be another great learning opportunity for so many people. So we wanted to kind of drop a few seeds that maybe sometime in the summer or whatever, we could have that as another topic, what you just laid out. So anyways, we can noodle on it a little later, but yeah, anyways, I think it'd be a good one. So
it would be.
Well, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it, and I've learned, some things myself. So I really appreciate it. I think this is a great group and a great forum or platform that you guys have here. I will try to engage more and join more of these, and I open up the site for the conference, so I may check it out and see how I can get engaged. But I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Ponce. I really appreciate your support and joining me tonight. Great. And Shanika, George, Victor, volunteer. Maybe I have to look at the date again. But if I'm available, I would like to see if I could what you need help with. So I'll reach out.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. All
Awesome.
right.
Same for me as well. I would like to know who to contact in regards to that.
Yeah, basically any of us. So Victor is one of the co-chairs for this year, so Victor's definitely a contact. But if you reach out to me, I can connect you to George as well. We actually are meeting tomorrow to discuss things specifically about the conference. So, but yeah, reaching out to like the LinkedIn channel. So I dropped website links in the chat. So feel free to connect with us through that as well. So,
What's the date, Shanika?
Victor.
The date is August 17th through 19th, 2023. But of course, we'll be doing planning activities all the way through.
Okay, 17th at night. Okay.
Now, see, they're being modest, but I'm not gonna, because I'm their elder. So I'm gonna say it like this. So you don't have to now. If you can't meet us in August, that's fine, because there's a lot of planning and volunteering and things that need to be done to plan for the big shebang in August. So and we need all the help that we can get.
And one thing I'll put out there, and John has been a godsend in this way, because as I mentioned, I'm 9 years into Atlanta, or Metro Atlanta. I'm not even in the city, right? And one of the challenges is ensuring that we have enough connectivity to the city and the people in the city that can help support the conference. So whether it be sponsorship, speakers, just participation, to have people in the room for the speakers. And it's difficult sometimes when you don't have the connectivity within the companies to help facilitate the conversations to encourage people to participate. So even things like that, like just introducing us to the network, that's a value add, right? Topics, even if you can't be a speaker, but recommending some emerging technology trends that would be a good topic at the conference, like that's helpful. So any tidbit is a help to us, and we take whatever we can get.
Okay, perfect.